Good evening, everyone. I'm going to call to order this called meeting of the Richland 1 School District Board of Commissioners. It is February 18th, 2025 at 5 p.m. We are located at the Stevenson Administration Building, 1616 Richland Street, Columbia, South Carolina. Pursuant to the Freedom of Information Act, all persons, organizations, and media outlets as requested have been notified of the time, date, place, and agenda of this meeting. We do have an agenda before us. Do I have a motion to adopt the agenda?
So moved. Second.
We've got a motion by Commissioner Weston, seconded by Commissioner Clyburn. Any discussion? Without discussion, I'll call for the vote. We'll do these manually. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed, say no. All right, it's a unanimous 7-0 vote. All board commissioners are here. So we will begin the agenda. We've got Office of the Board, 4.01, Superintendent Search Firm Presentation, BWP presented by Chairman Lominack. We have Drs. Kastner and Hill here to provide a presentation to the board about the superintendent search process. And I will ask, they are happy, in fact, encourage questions, but I would ask, just so we're not interrupting them throughout, because it gets a little cumbersome with me having to recognize commissioners, if you wouldn't mind taking notes. There's a PowerPoint slide hard copy that they've provided for everyone. If you wouldn't mind just taking notes, and at the end, I'll obviously recognize anyone and everyone who has questions. Does that sound okay? Yep. All right, Dr. Hill, Dr. Kastner? Okay, they are getting it ready.
Good evening, everyone.
Good evening.
Not good enough. Good evening, everyone.
Good evening.
Thank you. I'm Dr. Deborah Hill, and I'm the Managing Director of BWP and Associates, and I'm here with my colleague, Dr. Kevin Kastner, and we are the co-leads for the Richland 1 Superintendent Search. We're going to be playing tag team this evening as we quickly go through the process we need to have some information and some data from the commissioners in order for us to give this superintendent search the kickoff that it needs to have. Want to just say to the public, the intent is that this will be a transparent process. The community will be advised in terms of what their role is. The commissioners know what their role is. And by doing such, we anticipate having an outstanding fit and match for your new superintendent. Next slide, please. Working again directly with the Board of Commissioners, providing them with information, providing them with training with regards to the new superintendent search. That will be one of the tasks that we will undertake. We will be available to the commissioners 24/7 through this search. And whether you like it or not, we will be with you even a year after the superintendent is selected. We provide that service as a part of this particular contract, that we are available for that next year in order to make this fit, make this marriage a perfect one. And so we'll, again, you won't see the last of us once the search process is concluded. The next slide, please. Our team consists of myself, Dr. Deborah Hill, former school superintendent, currently director of BWP, as I indicated before, and previously president of ASCD, which is the largest professional organization outside of the teachers union, and so served proudly as president and member of that board for a number of years. So we'll be bringing that expertise and the networking capacity that I have in working with that organization that has about 119,000 members in 112 countries. And having had an opportunity to visit about 17 to 20 of those countries, coming in with a global perspective. So as we're looking for and helping you find that match, we want someone who's going to take your children to the next level. Dr. Kevin Kastner, I'll let him introduce himself a little bit. Just as a reminder,
First, a couple things. You all have a packet, and on the left-hand side of the packet is an overview of the 4 steps of the search process and also the PowerPoint. On the right side, I will be calling attention to some specific documents that we're going to need to discuss with you so that you can give us some decisions and direction for the search. There's nothing more important that you do as a board, and I know you recognize that. And I know it's been a while since you've had a superintendent search, but between Deb and I, we've done over 80 searches, and all the searches, there's a certain energy and enthusiasm. Because everybody, even in good systems, want to still take the next step forward with the combination new leadership that goes with the new superintendent and the board. So it's an exciting time. I've always found that to be true, and it does have some unity to it. But also, you as a board are using a process that has a lot of transparency. You are trusting us to go out into your community and hearing what people say and reporting back. And that itself is going to engage more people and have them even give their input on what they're looking for your next leader. Now, in regard to myself, I'm a former superintendent in Albemarle County in Charlottesville, Virginia. I was superintendent for 12 years. I spent 25 years in Maryland, in Prince George's County, which is very large, over 100,000, Frederick County, and Charles County. Since retiring as a superintendent, I now own a company called Cambridge Strategic Services, where we do strategic planning across the country, and have been involved in, with my colleague here, several superintendent searches, and we'll talk a little bit about that, because your commitment here is to do a national search. That's because your obligation is to see who we can find the best people out there. And my other colleague, Dr. Frank Morgan. Dr. Frank Morgan actually worked for me in Albemarle County and was the best assistant superintendent I ever had, and lost him. He ended up in Kershaw. And he is going to be working with us, and he has a great knowledge of South Carolina, but it helps us to understand a little bit of the nuances in this, and he knows a lot of people. And he's going to assist when we get into the community engagement with a lot of the outreach, but also give us his input along the way. And he's probably listening now. So if we can go on for the next step.
and I sort of apologize to the public for not being able to see this particular slide, but it has been included for the board. This talks about the superintendent search objectives. And I can summarize and tell you that what we're doing is looking for the best fit and match who will service your community and be looking for and delivering the best for your kids. This is all about the students. This is all about finding those individuals who can bring their energy, their ideas, their passion for student learning to Richland 1. So we have providing an opportunity for creating this process, and again, working with the Board of Commissioners to develop this process to identify those that will be the best successful candidates. Again, to foster communication and feedback and input from all members of the community, students, staff, leaders, community members, seniors, everyone's out there. We want this process to encourage people to participate through the mechanisms that will be made available to them, because at the end of this, I don't want there to be anyone in your community who chose not to participate because they didn't know what was happening. So we want to make sure that all stops are pulled out in order to communicate the process itself and the avenues by which they can participate. Recruiting. We not only take those individuals who apply for the position via the professional ads that will be produced and presented in a number of documents and through our website and through your website, but also the headhunt to go out and find people that we believe best match what you tell us that you're looking for. And some of those people don't even know they're looking for this job yet. And then finally, to complete the search with the board, using the timeline and the budget and the expectations that have been created, and that will be discussed as a part of the process. And so it really is a well-rounded system in terms of identifying who you're looking for. Next slide, please. We're not going to continue to laud ourselves and tell you how wonderful we are, but we did list a number of systems that we have worked with, both large and small, nationally as well as locally here in the South. And so you can take a look at those from the standpoint of South Carolina searches as well as national searches.
I would like to comment. There's 15,000 school systems. There's 15,000 school systems in the country. Only 2% are larger than 20,000. So you need to understand there's a greater complexity in larger systems, but there's also fewer qualified candidates. So it's important to be able to look at some of your larger systems and also the types of complexity, the diversity, the types of programs. So you narrow the search down. You know, you could have the superintendent of the year in Iowa in a homogeneous system that might be a great leader. They're not going to have the skill sets that might fit your community. So each search has a certain uniqueness. But the ability that BWP can bring is the fact that we do have some of that larger, more urban experience that will blend into a lot of the people that we already know, but also people that track us when we get involved with some of the larger searches.
So the commissioner's roles are to select the individual that will serve as your next superintendent. That's their primary function, with input from the community at large. The community's responsibility is to provide that input and that feedback so that the Board of Commissioners can make that decision. I'm going to tell you right now, the community does not get to vote on who the next superintendent will be. They will get to provide input. So the nature of this process will include a great deal of confidentiality about the candidates and the applicants for the position. And there's a reason for that. One, it will garner you more applicants to consider. People don't want to have the fact that they may be looking for a job bandied around about in their own community. So that's one aspect. Two, it minimizes any legal liabilities that occur. And again, I'm going to give you an example. Did a superintendent search in another state, and one of the board members shared with someone else in another community, someone who thought that they might apply for the job, and that got back to that person who then got back to somebody else and was advised that they wouldn't even be considered because they were not a minority candidate. Well, you know, that sent off a lot of flags, because then you have discrimination, regardless of what's happening in the nation right now. You have this notion of possibly being sued before they even got to attempt to apply for the position. And so we take very seriously the nature of confidentiality and are assured that the Board of Commissioners will do such as well. Any materials and information that we give you of a confidential nature will remain that way. We will provide documents and information and materials that can be shared with the public in the interest of transparency and open communication. But you'll hear us saying a lot about the nature of confidentiality in order to keep everybody above board and to protect you as individuals and protect your district in terms of legal issues that can come about when confidentiality is breached. So we customize your search. As Dr. Kastner has said, we've done searches all across the country. In spite of what's happening in Chicago right now, which is my hometown, I did the search for the current Pedro Martinez, thank you, who is under a little difficulty right now. But looking at the political nature of a city such as Chicago, to be able to find them a candidate that has done as well as he's done over time, I have experience in doing. So we are aware of the political nature and components of selecting a superintendent, and so we're aware of what's happening here in the state of South Carolina. And again, being able to maneuver and get candidates in who will be able to also maneuver around that possibility will, again, be one of those things that's one of our top priorities. So we have customized this search. You're different from any of the other 9,000 school districts in the area or in the United States. And so we take a look at what your needs are and address and adjust any of our plans in order to meet that need. Dr. Kastner is now going to talk a little bit about the 4-step search process. No, that was my slide.
Would you advance the slide, please? I think that's just what you described and how,
Right.
in the end, you're the decision maker.
So this 4-step process, which is the next slide. There you go. Again, in the interest of communication and transparency. So you want to start talking about that? And you notice we talk back and forth to each other. That's okay.
Truth be told, she's my boss. I work for her, as do about 30 or 40 other people that are associates in the country. I want to talk, while there's a 4-step process, and we're going to talk a little bit about recruitment and assessment and actually candidates that we'll bring to you. I want to start with the first phase of specifications. Next slide, please. On the right-hand side, you have a sheet that says key decisions for the Richland County Board of Commissioners. And we're going to, in a very deliberate process, go through and talk about calendar, communication. Dr. Hill's already talked about confidentiality and community engagement. Now, if you'll notice that there is a calendar, and it is the 3rd slide in where it says a draft timeline. Now, within the next week or so, we're going to be starting to fill out some of these dates. Now, the initial dates that we want to talk about is when we can get involved with your community in community engagement. And in doing the community engagement, and we want to talk about some of those details, we're going to be involving you, and we're going to need some input in which the board members are going to be selecting stakeholders of who it is we should meet and make sure we get a chance to get to your students and internally and externally any members of your community. Now, in doing that, there's a sheet in here that talks about suggestions for organizing community activities. This can trigger organizations that you might want to make sure that staff can work so that we're going to be in front of them when we come for a 2-day session in which we will have meetings on the hour so that we will have 35 to 40 meetings over a 2-day period, and we will have public forums that anyone can attend in the evening. And we also will try to use virtual means wherever it can help us attract even more people. You see the examples of the community engagement, and in doing that at the same time, there's a handout here, and again, while we're giving you a lot of material this evening, as you sift through it and process it, then it'll all start making sense to you. For example, we will have a quantitative community survey. The community survey in which we will work with our staff and your staff to decide what you normally do in communication on if you use more than one language. to how we can make access. We can put it on your website. We also have the opportunity where my email address is at the end, so people want to say more than they can do on a survey, and we collect that information. So quantitatively, we will be working in doing that. And as we go through that process within the next few weeks, we will end up bringing a report back to the board. Can I go to the next slide, please? So,
Before you go to the next slide, I'm looking at this wonderful audience here. Please raise your hand if you intend to take the survey. Please raise your hand. I need everybody's hand up so that, again, we've started with the group already to say you've made a commitment to participate in this by taking the survey when it comes online. Now, as a teacher, I'm also going to give you an assignment. And if you're gifted, you're going to go beyond that. I want you to get at least 5 other people to take the survey. And in every focus group that we have, I get people to commit to taking the survey and to getting at least 5 more. Now, if you're gifted, you're going to get more than 5. But the survey will be online. It will be electronic, and again, the board will make a determination as to the languages that might be included. But this is a start. This is a start here with you in terms of your participation. So I saw everybody raise their hand, which means we know we have at least this many people who will be taking the survey, and our goal is to have 1,500 to 2,000 people take the survey in the district your size. So that's a good start.
in Prince William County, in Maryland, in Virginia, 7,900 people took a survey. In Oregon, about 3,000. So again, if you talk about when you go to church, having your pastor talk about it, we do want to see that type of an engagement. And it's the type of thing that does bring some momentum, and it creates ambassadors in this whole process with you. So you're going to be able to see the sample survey. In the end, we're going to work with your staff, but in the end, the board's going to sign off on that survey to make sure it meets your needs. The same thing is going to occur with the stakeholder groups. All this will get organized, and we'll sift through all that. But on the front end, that's the type of the first thing that's going to happen in March. Now, when we get done, when we come in, let's say the second week in March. So we come back the 4th week in March. We're going to give you a community engagement report. The report's going to take all the quantitative information from all the survey information. We will disaggregate the students. And then when we have stakeholder meetings, we take notes as close to verbatim as possible, and we will have that information in this report. That's transparency. The other thing is, when people read this public document, if we've gotten something wrong, then that's a good point of discussion. The other thing is, you as board members, you're experts in your community. You'll know. And we also, and again, while we will interview each board member, we won't put down this board member says this or this person says this. We always do it in a composite to keep it anonymous in the appropriate way. So this information in the month of March, there's 2 things that are going to happen. The community engagement process will be in your community, and we'll be sharing and listening. And then there's going to be this report. So that's the first part, and you can sift through this information a little bit later when we're getting into it.
Now, let me give you a little sneak preview. With regards to the board interviews, with regards to the survey, with regards to the focus groups, which we will include students, there are going to be 4 questions so that everyone is focusing on the same 4 questions. The first is, what are the strengths of Richland 1? And again, the survey will ask those same kind of questions in a more compact way. But this will give people an opportunity to think about what they believe are the selling points of your district. Question number 2, what are some areas of concern or areas that may need to be considered and be investigated by the new superintendent? The third question is, what specific skill sets and characteristics will the new superintendent need to exhibit in order to be successful? So you have those 3 primary questions. And then the fourth is I call the catch-all, which is other things that may not have come up in the discussion or you would like to have seen in the survey but didn't get there. And there's questions such as, does the new superintendent it should be required that they have a doctorate? Does the new person need to have been a seated superintendent? Does the new person need to live in the community? And it'll be interesting to see how your community responds to those questions. And again, by gathering this qualitative data to go with the quantitative data, we now have a full picture. And what we will present to you are the top 10 to 12 touch points where about 75 to 80% of the participants responded to those specific questions, so that you'll have a good list of what those responses were. And it really works well for incoming candidates because they can look and see, oh, I started applying for this position, but I really don't think I have those experiences. Or, yes, this is going to be for me because I've done such and so, such and so, such and so, and can respond to that. So again, it's an opportunity for the community to provide feedback and input, but to have a comprehensive review and report relative to what those dimensions look like. That last question, skill sets and characteristics, then enable us to generate a leadership profile. The leadership profile becomes key in being the blueprint for all of the activities that subsequently take place. It will allow us to screen applicants' papers. It will allow us to screen the applicants themselves in terms of BWP's team looking at the applicants. It will allow the board to review the applications that we will recommend. So everyone then is looking from the same vantage point. And so the outliers, you had an opportunity to share your information, but the focus will be on those key things that came out as a part of the leadership profile.
So as we follow this process, and you can definitely be assured it'll be data-driven. And it's important to refresh this. And I'll tell you, over the years, it's changed. Right out of COVID, we had a whole different set of issues. We're back into a situation now where we have more recovery, but I think there isn't too many districts that won't say there's still a lot of work yet to be done. And now we're also dealing with a different time. So a lot of things happening in the country. A lot of these things will help you listen to how we find certain degrees of consensus, and also issues out there that are going to need to be addressed not only by you as a board, but by your new superintendent. And that's just the evolving process of public education. So as you can understand, the community engagement is very critical. It's the center of getting the data that will drive to find a candidate that has some match and fit with what you want. Next slide, please. So we go through, there'll be board interviews, we'll meet with the group, we'll do the survey, we'll create the profile. That's just in summary what will happen in March. Next slide, please. Getting into recruitment, and Deb, if anything you want to add in here, we've already started. We've had people call us. We have information on our site. We have an advertising plan that we are recommending. We're giving you the 30-day version because we think that you're prominent enough. Going 60 days isn't going to get us more bang for the buck. We'll keep you under $2,000, but we will hit the Black Alliance, we'll hit the Alice group with the Spanish
Latino,
groups.
yeah.
Excuse me?
Latino. Go.
The Latino group. We're going to hit Ed Week, which is national. We'll hit AASA. Dr. Hill will be at a national conference, and she'll be, again, talking to people about your job. You might have some South Carolina conferences where you'll be talking about that. At the same time, when we're working on that, in the next week or so, we're going to be working with staff, and we're going to try to create an announcement vacancy. Now, the announcements vacancy, and you have a sample, I think, of Arlington, we will customize that for your district, but what we're going to need to do is to have a cut date when applications will close. We think in order to backward map, you want a superintendent on board July 1 or before. We want to probably have the cut date towards the end of April. And then at that point, we then want to set a date with the board where we will try to present candidates to you. So in the recruitment, we go into then the selection process. So the next slide, please. When we go into the assessment of candidates, our goal is to have no surprises. We need to vet people. We need to look at Google searches, social media, and references that go beyond their references. Everybody writes a good reference. We need to go beyond that. And we have a talent with that because we can read between the lines. And also, we know a lot of people. So that when we bring people to you, that you won't have surprises, but we're going to work very hard. And as we go through the process, we then would recommend a deep background check, whether taking traffic tickets, bankruptcy, anything else that might be out there, all so we can have this on the front end before we can get to the point where you're going to have 3 candidates eventually are going to be out in the public when they do the day in the district, because that's South Carolina process, and that's going to occur. So meanwhile, we're going to be working on the ad plan, and as we get to the summary of the meeting, I'm going to ask your board chair, is as you've looked at that, if you can tell us that it makes sense to you and we can give it a go. Also, we then want to start in working with the calendar to create an announcement, but when we create the announcement, it's got to go from staff to the board chair for you to sign off. We also have to do the issue of the quantitative survey, work with staff, back to you to sign off. So you can see where you're the decision makers in all this, and there will be some uniqueness just to your community. You want to talk a little bit more about assessment?
In assessing the candidates, one of the first things we do is, again, as we're gathering data relative to the profile, is individually we take a look at the applicants. I'm completing a search where we had about 37 applicants that the team individually reviews those applications and pick the top 10 or 12 people that we think most closely meet the profile on an independent basis. Then the team gets together and it goes through all 37 of those applicants again, and then jointly reach consensus and connect with, again, another 10 to 12 that we think meet your profile. We then conduct interviews, one-to-one, face-to-face, Zoom face. And from that, then we collectively, as a team, determine which could be 4, could be 6, 4 to 6 candidates that we think best meet the profile that we would like to then present to the board for their consideration. In doing that, we have researched those individuals. We will present to the board our recommendations and talk about why we're recommending those individuals, and then the board will determine whether they want to proceed to go through their steps, which would be an interview and a review relative to those candidates, so that you can then narrow that down to maybe 2 to 3. And then from that 2 to 3, those semifinalists, you would select your finalists. So there really is a process by individually looking at individual candidates. And as I mentioned before, the nature of confidentiality of who those people are, the board will not receive the whole list of the 37, 40, 20, however many candidates or applicants they are. You will only receive those that we are recommending. And again, it's for your protection, it's for the protection of the district, because those become personnel files. And we don't want you to be in jeopardy because of a leak relative to those personnel files. And so once that occurs, you will have access to the files of those people that you select to interview and then the finalists that you have. But those are board documents. They will not go out to the public. So,
a rule of thumb on candidates we'll consider, she might have had 37. But the first thing we're looking, have they been in a cabinet position? Have they been in a comparable school system? Can they show data where they've moved the needle in student performance? How do they get along with staff? All these types of things we'll have to get into the weeds, so to speak, to make sure that they're going to meet that leadership profile. It's hard to beat 100%, but we want to at least hit 80% to the point that these candidates will, if anything, make it hard for you in figuring out how to separate. But you'll go through that process. If we go to the next slide, please. We get into the selection. Now we're going to present some candidates to you that we feel that we'll put our name on the line and we'll do the search over at costs if they don't make it through 2 years. That happened once to me. The person who got advanced became state superintendent. It worked out. So I'm saying not because they were having issues. When we have two things we'll do with the board. Now I know some of the board members have been through a search. And probably they've been through some of this, but we have a protocol sheet or report in which we talks about the do's and don'ts of how you do interviews. There's certain things you can't do. You can't say, well, how old are you? What's your religion? We're going to explain that to you, which is, you know these things. But we want to refresh that to make sure as we work towards that. But we also want to give you different protocols of how you arrive at consensus and sample questions that are related to your survey. So there's a training piece so we get all board members on board. And then we present the candidates. And in presenting the candidates, we will give you their complete resume, report, application. It's going to be about this thick, and Google search information. We will give it as your board decides in a notebook that could be about this thick, or we can also do it electronically in a Dropbox. We'll get that direction from you at a later point. But all that information that you have that will help assist you in getting to the point of going through the first interview and then moving forward to your 3 finalists, which will lead to the day in the district. We can help you with that. And there's also examples of other systems that we can look at that you can work with staff, and even board members know this too. So this information and the public record that will follow all that will lead to the point where you can end up getting to a point where you select a candidate, you begin your negotiations, and you get to the point also in doing this, it is absolutely imperative that all board members attend these meetings. It's also imperative, as far as I'm concerned, that you don't get people on split votes. For someone to come in and bring their family on a split vote is not the right message. That's the type of thing that you work on behind closed doors and see if you can find that common consensus. You want to add to that, Deb?
Again, as Dr. Kastner talked about the training that we will do, and that will be done on the same night that we present you with the slate. A lot of that conversation has to do with how do you build consensus? And we actually have some exercises that we will take you through in order to help you determine how you build consensus on the candidates that we presented that you determined that you want to look at. So again, everybody is on the same wavelength. And guess what? All of that's related to the leadership profile. So again, you're all working from the same standpoint in terms of looking at their materials, in terms of assessing how they meet the profile, in terms of your determination of what are the challenges that they have demonstrated that they could address, all of those component pieces. And it will also be inclusive of information that, again, input and feedback that the community may have provided based on that profile as well. So it really is a pretty structured process, determined in order to get you the best possible candidate.
Next slide, please. The proposed timeline, we're talking about backward mapping. I know you all want to get this done have someone on board in July. When you backward map, we're talking about doing the interviews in May. Getting it all done in May, figuring out those deadlines. So with your approval, when we finish this meeting off with your board chair, to the point where you're in agreement on what we're saying, then we start working on the details with staff, try to find the most common, best dates so it's convenient for the greatest amount of people. So you can see where we're at. We have the 4 steps. All this kind of fits into place. And I think we're at the point right now that as we've organized this, we have certain things where you're going to be the decision makers. Now, you can't do the leadership profile yet because we haven't had the report. As far as the announcement, allow staff to work with it. We'll figure out the cut date, which I think towards the end of April. And then the issue on, again, example of the survey, having you look at all that. As far as the ads, we'd like to see if you would approve that we suggest 30 days versus 60. It saves you a couple $1,000s, but we still think that will work. But we need you to say that that's the direction you would give us. And I hope that there's anybody in here that doesn't understand the importance of confidentiality. We sometimes have board members sign it, but I've had people sign it and still violate it. But you don't want to be those people. And I think you understand the importance, as Dr. Hill has explained it. Next slide, please. Right here, we're at questions, and we'd be happy to entertain any of your questions.
Thanks, Drs. Kasser and Dr. Hill. Do we have any questions of these folks? Commissioner Devine.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Just a few questions, and it pertains to community engagement. I think you answered these, but just want to hear your response. I got about 4 questions, and I'll yield after that. What mechanisms are in place to address concerns from the community? What were those things that you all discussed earlier? Those mechanisms to address any concerns from the community. Once we've got the profile, once we've done that piece with the community, are there any additional mechanisms to address any additional concerns from the community?
The purpose of this is not to address those concerns, but to identify what they are.
Okay.
So that ultimately, when your new superintendent comes in, that may be things that they have to take a look at. This process is not designed to fix things. It's designed to put it all out there so that everyone is looking at the same information relative to that piece.
All right. Thank you.
I think also you're going to notice when we ask the general question, what are your strengths? That's pretty easy. Then we ask what your concerns are, but then we have the leadership, then we have the issue of the quantitative survey. Mm-hmm. So you will see a certain energy on certain questions more than others that, probably you already are aware of, but you're giving that opportunity. The other thing on the survey is I have my email at the end. And I will tell you, some people like to say a lot more than you can do on a survey. And sometimes they're very insightful. Sometimes it gets a little rough. But the fact that we can keep that open-ended to at least say people have that opportunity. Now, I will tell you, when we have our public forums and we do our stakeholder meetings, we stick to the question. We're not here to solve the reading program. We're not here to talk about some of the discipline issues that you might have with vaping in the high school. But we have to recognize it, but we're not here to solve it.
Right. All right. So my next question is, you mentioned this earlier, but how will the community, how will you communicate key dates and information to the community during the search?
We would hope that you have a dedicated website. We will provide you with documents that can be then posted and listed. The calendar should be there. The listing of the things that we talked about that we're doing in terms of the timeline, that should be there. We really, really emphasize a major push in order to identify people who are going to participate in the focus groups, but also attendance at the community forums that will be at the conclusion of when we have the focus groups. And just as I had all of these wonderful people out here raise their hands to participate in the survey, again, we want people to participate because they know about it and to not say later they never heard of what was happening in the district. And so it's our job and it's your job to communicate the process and encourage people to participate because this is their chance.
Right. Very good. Thank you. And then my other question is, what methods will you use to gather feedback from the parents, staff, and stakeholders?
They have, if they're invited to, it may be a representative from the building or from your PTA, PTO, or maybe from a community organization to attend the focus groups, which will be relatively small size groups, 12 to 15 people who will be meeting with us face to face, and we'll be presenting those 4 questions and taking down those notes. So that's one possibility. The second possibility is the all-important survey. Everybody has an access to a computer or a phone. The survey can be accessed to both of those. We asked the community to engage in making sure that the public library and any other place that has public access to computers make it available and maybe even set up a special day or time when people can come in and utilize that facility in order to get their survey done. We ask at the schools, for example. So we try to help you put an outreach out there to give people access to minimally the survey, but in larger form to the focus groups and even a larger form to the community forums, which some may be offered via telecommunication, via Zoom, where people can then sign up to participate via Zoom. And again, it's the same process. And so this extension of multiple ways in order to provide the input really becomes important, but your communication and announcements and asking the ministers to stand before their congregation and invite people to take the survey or invite people to participate in the community forum, our outreach to people really is dependent on what you're doing in terms of outreach.
I'd like to add a couple things additionally. In every meeting we have, we're going to encourage people to talk to your board members. You have relationships throughout the community. This is the time before you make your decision in the middle of May that people can weigh in with you. So we'd like to see that happen. You also can have one group decide to testify to the board. This is what we're looking for. So we're trying to use multiple means. And again, you do a lot of this in your budget process, and there's certain key flashpoint issues where you're probably not lacking for people wanting to have a few things to say. But we'd like to have this one focused on the search itself. So in multiple ways, it'll just happen because that's the structure that the process yields to it. Good questions.
It's also an outreach to those populations that you feel are not necessarily represented. How do you reach out to them? In my community, when we did the search, I had a meeting with the Ministerial Alliance. And then that following Sunday, my pastor stood up and had everyone who had taken the survey raise their hand. So I think a lot of people skipped church the next week because the expectation was if you didn't raise your hand last Sunday, you're going to raise your hand today. And again, so it's finding ways, having posters or having flyers or even having copies of the survey at your nursery schools, your preschools, places that aren't in the school. So the more outreach you can do, the better your results are going to be. And so we can make all that happen, and we'll be working with the staff in order to ensure that we reach every corner, every crevice of your community to engage with them as a part of this process.
In Charlotte, Mecklenburg, they told me to talk to a stakeholder group in a Hindu temple. I didn't realize that in Charlotte, Mecklenburg, there were over 20,000 Hindus. So because that was a viable part of their community, they made sure that I went there. Same thing happens in some of the Hispanic communities. This is where you as board members and your awareness with your communication staff can get us to certain places that you think are important. So this is where we have to partner, but under your direction.
Very good. Mr. Chairman, thank you.
Thank you. Commissioner Hersey and then Commissioner Bishop.
Thank you all for the presentation. For the survey, have you determined what platform you're going to use to send out the surveys, or is that something we would, okay, yeah,
SurveyMonkey.
SurveyMonkey, okay.
SurveyMonkey, and we have a consultant that will work with your tech person in order to set it up. The announcement should be sent out that the surveys are available online, and typically the surveys are online for about 2 weeks. We find that if you give people much more time than that, they're still not going to do it. If you give them a specific amount of time, and everybody, that window is advertised as long, as with the survey, then people who are going to participate will participate.
Okay.
But we use SurveyMonkey, and again, the board will determine what languages you want to have. Typically, it's in Spanish and English, but if you have large populations of other language groups that you normally send out district communications to, we will structure the survey for them as well.
And so it would be up to the board to determine how, if we can post it on the district's website, if it would be emailed out to parents through Power School, just to make sure it gets out to everyone. Okay.
Yes.
And it would all be anonymous.
Yes.
So that, okay, thank you.
Survey, focus group discussions, all of that is anonymous.
Okay.
One of the important aspects of that is when we present the report, we say what people say, but we don't identify any individual relative to that piece. And I'm going to probably be a little disrespectful right now and say for the board, when we do the focus groups, you are not invited to attend.
I just want to make sure that people are comfortable doing it, and that's the reason I asked, so that we get good quality feedback, so that the employees will know that there's no tracking that is done through an anonymous system.
And
Thank
that's
you.
why you are not invited to attend
Right.
any of the focus groups.
Thank you.
Commissioner Bishop.
Thank you, Chair. Let me first start off by telling this dynamic duo, you did a great job impressing upon us the critical nature of this process. And my questions are pointed towards step one. We cannot afford, as a board and a community and a school district, to get this wrong. So I'm really interested in step one, which is specifications. Can you tell me a little more about how the organizational profile will be developed to meet the candidacy pool of the leadership profiles we receive? Because I do have a follow-up question, but I will allow you just to kind of take a moment to give us an explanation of how do y'all create the organizational profile?
Again, the organizational profile is a part of that engagement process. As we're listening is a very important skill set. As we're listening to you
Absolutely.
individually from the board, as we're listening to members of the community, we're gathering that data even before we have it down on paper.
Yeah.
And so consequently, that enables us to go out and start to headhunt and to look for candidates based on what we've already heard. Once we put together that profile, then it's posted on your website, posted on our website, and what happens is interested parties then take a look at that. And they take a look at what you said are your strengths. What have you said have been characteristics that they're interested in? What have you said are issues that might be? And so the actual applicants have a chance to take a look at what you need and make a determination whether they should proceed or not. And so putting that all together in terms of that first step becomes a critical mass. And that's why it's important for as many people as possible to participate in that engagement process, because then we're presenting information that's representative of the entire community that a person is going to come in and have to work with. And so if you have a group that says, well, you have teachers that say, we didn't get a chance to do it, or we didn't participate, and so therefore this is invalid. Again, it needs to be because they chose not to participate, not because they were not given an opportunity to participate. And so that's why it's really important to get the word out, get the message out. You know, your homework assignment of having a minimum of 5 people or gifted +5. All of those components all work together, but it's the board's connection and communication and conversation with your community at large that will get you the feedback and input that you're looking for. So you got to get the message out there. You may find multiple ways of doing that. You know your community. You know the factions and the fragment pieces and all of those components of your community. And we'll give you the tools to help us help you contact and be in touch with all segments of your populations.
The reason why I asked that because a lot of the listening can lead to subjective data, which means it's people's opinion, when I'm really concerned more about the objective overview of this organization. And so when we look internally, looking at, the data, the quantitative measure of who we are as a profile academically, what are our programs, what does the CAPE program offer, what does the athletic facilities cost, those things help us really align with a quality pool of leaders who will come in with that leadership profile to match. When you look at the objective view of being rural, suburban, and urban, that is very important to me because meeting people's opinions will set us up for failure, in a sense. I want to make sure that it's a great balance between objective opinion, objective assessment through organizational alignment analysis, or coupled with subjective opinions. You understand what I'm saying? So that's why I asked, how will you develop the organization profile? Will you spend time with the brass or the leaders of this district all the way down to the custodians to find out, here's what we are, no matter what the subjective opinion is, because as I do understand, you'll have what I think Commissioner Devine asked, stakeholder input. You want to hear the preachers or the pastors. You want to hear from the Chamber of Commerce. You want to hear from the nonprofit partners that we have. That's all well and dandy, but I want to make sure that we look at the organizational alignment analysis as to what we are.
So, using both the quantitative and qualitative data that we've collected, it goes to another consultant who does a frequency distribution analysis. So again, you have more data. You have someone else coming in, objectively looking at the information that we're providing them that we got from you. That's how we get to the top 10. That's how we get to the top 10 in terms of what the issues seem to be, what the strengths seem to be, what the skill sets and characteristics seem to be. It's through a scientific process called frequency distribution. What does that look like in terms of the number of times people have said that the math program is an issue, or number of times that people have said we really need to take a look at what our bilingual program looks like. So the number of times that people say that, again, creates a distribution frequently.
Yeah.
Sometimes you'll only get one something. That goes at the left end of the spectrum. But when you get more and more and more, that starts to generate to the right end of the spectrum, and that's the piece that we look at. So it gives everybody a chance to say what they want to say, but it takes a look at how often that is said and communicated, and that's how you generate those numbers.
Yeah, and in your profile, you said you use a variety of methods. So I believe that we'll definitely get to that customization, right?
Yes.
But let's talk about customization for a second.
Okay.
When I look at the weighted or tiered profile that you probably will develop, how do you recommend this board go about making sure we're putting a weighted capacity on the profile of the leader to meet the needs of this district? Will it be because of the surveys where it'll say we want a leader who has a strong suit, and I mean a skill set, in public relations, a strong suit in academic leadership? How will that come out in the survey results? How would that come out?
One of the things we talk about to candidates when we even do our interviews, that one-to-one after we've screened down that applicant pool, one of the things we ask is, show us, tell us, How did you improve student academic performance? How did you get more community input? How did you work with the teachers union? And so they're given an opportunity. If it's not in the written information that they submitted, because they submit a resume that gives you a list of their experiences from their perspective. They submit at least 4 letters of recommendation where people are, again, documenting what people said that they had to do. So that's another piece. We interview them. We generate questions based on the leadership profile that get at how did you tell us how, show us what documents do you have in order to connect to this particular piece. And the important part is when we then present to the board, we will tell you what we learned about these candidates, because you can't always extrapolate what you need from the written word. You need to be able to hear and see and talk to that individual. Then you need to hear and see and talk to some other people who may or may not, be on board, but who can give you some additional information. So when we bring a candidate to you, trust me, we've gone through their stuff with a fine-tooth comb. I've talked to at least 2 or 3 people who they don't know that I've talked to, as well as the people that they've listed in their application process. And I asked 3 questions. I asked, first of all, how long have you known how long have you known this individual and in what capacity? And have there been projects or other activities that you worked on jointly? So you can tell me from a standpoint, not write me, but tell me how that worked out. The second thing I ask is, so tell me what the strengths of this individual are. Much like we talk about the strengths of the district. And then I ask a question that says, so what are some areas for polish? So that gets at things that that individual may have observed that they think that the candidate could continue to work on. And then finally ask them, so give me some more information about the individual. This is done to both the applicants' references as well as people that we've now reached out and touched who know that individual. We do a Google search as well as a media search so that if there are any surprises, you'll know about them ahead of time. We have eliminated applicants and candidates because we found something that's going to be really hard to explain. We ask them if we include them in an interview. So you need to talk about and explain this, or we commonly say, so are there any skeletons in your closet? And they need to respond to that so that when we come to you with this list of candidates that we're proposing that you interview, we've done all that background, done all of that homework, done all of that checking, and it's not just done from a paper perspective, but we're looking at statistics and we're looking at data and we're looking at follow-up for those candidates. I know Kevin has something else to say.
I want to come at this a little differently. I want to put it on you as a board. So we're in May. You've had the opportunity to get ready to interview these people. You as a board are going to have to develop a consensus of what are the most important things you want people to tell us whether you're going to be the best match and fit for us. You might not all agree, but sooner or later you're going to have to figure out, if you do 2 rounds of questions and you're going to ask a question each round, what are your 14 questions? And you're going to have to come to some agreement on that. And you're the experts. You're going to have all this information. We triangulate the data.
Yes, sir.
But there's going to be some things that might be more important. It might be achievement gap. It could end up being budget. It could end up being the issue of community engagement. It could be the issue of children wellness. I don't know what the hot button issues may or may not be. But you as a board, when you get to those questions and you have them stand and deliver, they need to be able to show that they and you are on the same page. So in the end, it has a lot to do with your role, and that's what board members do.
Chair, only maybe 1 or 2 more questions, and they're very quick. When we look at the survey, and you told us all to raise our hand, what would be the target for a district this size for surveys to go out? Is no telling? Could it be
Let me explain
unlimited?
something to you, and I've had this happen. So when we do the survey, And we have 700 questions. 700 people have responded. I get the survey data. We then have, and we do the same survey with 1,500. There's not going to be a difference between 1 or 2%. I'm not a psychometrician, but these patterns seem to work. In a district like yours, you're going to end up 2,000 to 3,000 responses, and even someone will say, but our district is 22,000. Well, the data will show a pattern.
Yeah. Thank you. Thank you, Chair.
Commissioner Clyburn.
Thank you for that, for this presentation. I have a question about the focus groups. So when we're talking about the pool of individuals that the focus group will be chosen from, and I may have missed this in the presentation, but I don't remember whether you said it or not. Who's responsible for choosing those? Would that be you all, or?
That's you.
Okay. So, with that being said, how do you recommend us moving forward to choosing those individuals? Do we get a certain number for each board member, just to make it, because the focus group could be weighted heavily on one side or one on the other side? I would want a focus group to be, I guess, fair or what's the word I want to?
There are a number of
Yeah.
ways that you can do that. First of all, identifying the groups that you want to create in the focus groups. So you want to have community representatives from not-for-profit organizations. You may want to have university representatives. So you're looking across your district in terms of who's out there, large group-wise, that you want to have participate. So then you may have, we would like to have a letter of invitation. We would like to have 2 members from your organization represent your organization in this focus group. Focus groups can be organized as like groups. And for example, we recommend that teachers and administrators, both at the central office level and at the business level, they have their kind of own groups. We recommend that the students, we structure it so that we can either by Zoom do students at one of their lunch times. Again, they're going to get those same 4 questions. And so within the school, it's the school's determination of what students they're going to ask, and we ask to do it across the board. If you're going to do, include freshmen, sophomore, juniors, and seniors to participate. You may determine that then you're going to have the Ministerial Alliance. They may have some additional suggestions for people to participate, but it goes back to you, the board, to determine what groups you want to identify and then the number of participants. And people have to RSVP. I know it's kind of like a passé thing now, but people need to RSVP so that you will know who's coming to the groups, how many. Typically, I like to work with focus groups of no more than 15 because then everybody has an opportunity. But I have worked with focus groups that are as small as 2 or 3. And so it's who you invite, getting them to respond, and then conducting the group. Then you have the community open forum, which everybody can come to, except for board members, can come to the focus group and have those conversations. What I found in my experience has been oftentimes people who take the survey don't come to the community forum because they've already given their input. But sometimes people want to hear what other people have to say. And again, that's why we talk about this anonymity with regards to the results and what's going to get presented, because we don't want people to feel endangered or that they will come back to haunt them relative to their speaking up. But we're focusing on those 4 questions. We're not talking about the problem that you may have had with your school principal. I mean, so it's taken out of the personal realm and into the larger picture. But it's the board to determine who you want to invite, extend the invitation, and again, we will work with your staff to get those invitations out. There should be a deadline date for them to respond. Then we can organize the groups. We can conduct groups all day and half the night so that you can accommodate kind of the life schedule and work schedule of the people that you want to have. And we now have the luxury of being able to use electronic Zoom communication in order to conduct some groups. So you can get a lot of people in those focus groups over a 2-day period of time.
Okay, thank you. And I just have one more question. Online surveys are, definitely convenient, and you can maximize participation that way. But we do have a segment, of the population that either they're not tech savvy or computer savvy, or they don't have the internet. But I know we have the library, and maybe possibly, I'm not sure of whether any of the schools could be used. But I thought I heard you say that it may be possible for the phones, maybe something to be put out on phones.
The survey can be done
Okay.
via phone, via cell phone. You can do the survey via cell phone. You can also have hard copies of the survey available at places that people go. So in my community, we've got 3-4 major grocery stores, and we worked with them to set up a little section in the customer service area that people could come and pick up a survey and complete it and return it to them. And then the people at that store then sent them all into one central location in central office, who then transferred it to us, and then we input the data. So you look at the number of ways, the number of mechanisms you need in order to get people to participate in the survey. And again, at our church, everybody's relatively computer savvy, but for some of the seniors, my pastor did have hard copies for people to be able to complete, but he had them complete them before they left the church that afternoon. Set aside time a little bit later on, and then had people there available to help them if they had questions about any of the questions.
Okay, and I just wanted to clarify. So when I was talking about phones, I was wondering about the possibility of maybe doing it like a text survey, or is that
Typically,
something
that doesn't
that's-
work as well. We haven't done that. We have accessed the survey via your cell phone. The interesting part about that is that's probably the hardest way to answer the questions, is using the phones, which is why we again have gone to the libraries and other places that have computers, and we'll have a dedicated person that can help someone to do that. But you can take the survey using your telephone.
Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner Clyburn. Any other questions? All right. Thank you very much to both of you. We will see you a lot over the next few months. Yes.
I need your direction. The as plan that we've suggested, are you okay with? 30 days.
Well, I think that's probably something, this isn't listed as an action item, I don't think.
It's just
But-
consensus.
Yeah, I think that's fine. I don't think that's something we need to vote on. So I think we're fine with the 30 days, given what you said.
Okay, then we'll get back to you with some calendar information.
Yes.
Again, your communication staff, whatever their best practices are that work with other things you do, we want to build on those. And if you have a new suggestion that you want them to talk about, that's where your staff needs to weigh in. Particularly if there's certain pockets in your community that we might need to have someone go into an evening session and maybe do the survey where sometimes language might be a barrier. So that's where your staff needs to try to assist you in getting the outreach that you desire.
Remember, we work for you. And so consequently, we're going to do whatever it's going to take in order for you to extend this process to the community. And so other little things that you come up with that you think might help improve the communications component or provide the input that you need to have, we're willing to do and help facilitate that, because that's the important aspect of this entire thing, is community engagement in order to help you make the best decision possible for the district.
Thanks to both of you, and we'll be speaking, I'm sure, very soon, and lots. All right, so we're done with 4.01. We do have an executive session agenda before us. Do I have a motion to go into executive session?
Move for approval, Chair.
Second.
All right, we've got a motion by Commissioner Bishop, seconded by Commissioner Devine to go into executive session. Any questions or discussion? Thank you all. Thanks. Thanks.
Thank you, thank you, thank you. Yes, sir. Thank you.
Any questions or discussion? No, sir. All right, I'll call for the vote. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed, say no. All right, it's unanimous vote, 7-0. So we will go into executive session. We have one item on the executive session agenda that is 5.01, legal advice regarding the ELC construction project presented by Dr. Richardson. We need a motion to come out of executive session. Do I have a motion?
I move.
Second.
Commissioner Hersey has moved to come out of executive session. Commissioner Weston has seconded it. Do I have any discussion or questions? I'll call for the vote. All in favor of coming out of executive session, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed, say no. The ayes have it, a unanimous 7-0 vote. We are now out of executive session and back in public session. And we have 6.01, legal advice regarding the ELC construction project presented by Dr. Richardson.
Good evening, Chair Lomanek and board members. The board received legal advice related to the Early Learning Center, and it was for information purposes only.
Does anyone have any questions of Dr. Richardson? All right, thank you, Dr. Richardson. And we'll move on to 7.01. The next regularly scheduled board meeting will be held on Tuesday, February 25th, 2025 at 7 p.m. at Columbia High School, 1701 Westchester Drive, Columbia, South Carolina, 29210. And I think with that being said and without objection, we stand adjourned. Thank you.
Thank you.